Have you ever felt cursed by the thing that makes you different? Not a flaw, not a weakness, but a strange gift that no one else around you seems to carry. It is the way you walk into a room and immediately sense what's unspoken. The false smile hiding despair. The sharpness in someone's voice that betrays unhealed wounds. The heavy silence between two people who pretend everything is fine. You notice what others overlook, and instead of feeling empowered, you feel haunted by it. Carl Jung called this the most dangerous discovery of his career, not neurosis, but the rare ability to see beneath the surface of human life. He warned that this ability could either destroy you or transform you into something extraordinary, because seeing everything is not neutral. It isolates you. It makes you feel as though you live in a world that no one else inhabits. And yet, this forbidden sight is not an accident. It is consciousness evolving through you. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But the truth he rarely spoke aloud was that the path to becoming yourself is paved with unbearable clarity. To carry this kind of perception is to feel like a mirror that others cannot bear to look into. Friends who grow distant because your presence unsettles them. Relationships where your sensitivity is mistaken for criticism. Work environments where your quiet honesty becomes a threat. You start to wonder, is there something wrong with me? Why do I always end up the one who sees too much? The danger, Jung discovered, is not in the perception itself. The danger is in not knowing how to carry it. To see too much without integration is to drown in truths you cannot silence. But with the right path, the same sight that isolates you can become the very medicine humanity needs. This is the paradox of your gift. It can exile you from the world or make you a pioneer of consciousness. And in this journey, I will show you both sides, the curse and the cure, so that you can finally understand what your sight truly means. Because the question is not whether you see too much. The question is, will you learn to see wisely? In 1913, when Carl Jung was wrestling with his own psychological crisis after breaking away from Freud, a patient entered his practice who would change everything. She was not unstable. She was not delusional. She was something else entirely, something Jung himself had never documented before. He described her as deeply introverted, quiet, and highly intuitive. But beneath that stillness lived a perception so sharp, it cut through every mask around her. She could walk into a room and feel the atmosphere as if it were a physical weight pressing against her skin. She knew who was lying without proof. She sensed secret resentments in a friend's polite tone. She recognized pain in someone's laughter before they even admitted it to themselves. Jung wrote in his notes, "The patient displays an extraordinary capacity for perceiving unconscious contents in others, but this faculty appears to cause her considerable distress rather than advantage." Think about that. The thing that should have given her insight, clarity, and wisdom became the reason she couldn't hold friendships, keep jobs, or maintain normal relationships. People felt naked around her. They pulled away, unsettled by being seen so completely. And she, carrying all their unspoken truths inside her body, became overwhelmed, unable to distinguish what belonged to her and what she had absorbed from others. You might recognize pieces of her story in your own life. That heaviness you carry after a simple conversation because you have absorbed the emotions no one else acknowledged. That frustration when people accuse you of overthinking or being too sensitive, when in reality you are simply picking up what they refuse to face. That loneliness when relationships collapse, not because you caused chaos, but because your presence revealed what others desperately wanted to keep hidden. This patient's life became living proof of Jung's dangerous discovery. Perception without integration leads to isolation. She was not crazy. She was not broken. She was a mirror too clear for others to stand in front of. Jung realized he was not treating an illness. He was witnessing a phenomenon. What happens when the unconscious becomes too conscious? When one individual perceives too much for social survival? He wrote, "The danger lies not in the perception itself, but in the psychic isolation it creates for this woman." Her gift became exile. But her story also opened a door. Because through her, Jung began to see that the problem was not the perception, it was the absence of a way to live with it. And maybe that is the same battle you have been fighting? The question that stalks you: how do you survive when the thing that makes you extraordinary also leaves you unbearably alone? This patient showed Jung the cost of sight without guidance. But her suffering was also the seed of a deeper revelation, the archetype of the seer, the one who sees through illusions, yet must find a way to live among those who cannot. And that is where we go next. Jung eventually realized that his patient was not an isolated case. She represented an archetype, a timeless pattern of human psychology that has appeared in every era. He called it the introverted intuitive type, the rarest of all psychological orientations, less than 1% of the population. The seer lives with vision turned inward, yet paradoxically perceives what lies hidden in everyone else. They are not content with surfaces. They pierce through appearances, sensing the subterranean movements of the soul. While others are distracted by words and gestures, the seer registers what is unspoken, the shadow, the repression, the grief that has no language. You know this archetype because, in some ways, you are living it. You have walked into a gathering and felt the tension humming beneath polite conversation. You have heard the quiet despair behind a friend's cheerful story. You have recognized the envy or resentment in a passing glance, even when no one else noticed. It can feel like you are carrying a secret radar that won't turn off. A radar that makes you indispensable in some moments and unbearable in others. Jung warned that this archetype carries both immense potential and immense risk. He wrote, "When one sees clearly what others cannot or will not see, one becomes a mirror that society cannot bear to look into. That mirror reflects not just truth, but shadow, the denied parts of the psyche that people would rather project outward than face within. And here lies the danger. When you reflect back what others can't bear to acknowledge, they often attack you instead of facing themselves. You have seen it. You mention that something feels wrong, and suddenly you are accused of being negative. You express concern about someone's obvious pain, and they lash out as if you have created it. You hold up the mirror, and instead of gratitude, you receive blame." Jung called this phenomenon shadow projection. He observed it everywhere, in families, in groups, in entire cultures. The bearer of perception becomes the scapegoat, the designated problem, not because they have done harm, but because they reveal harm that already exists. To be the seer is to live as a lightning rod for other people's unconscious storms. And yet, Jung also understood the profound necessity of this archetype. Without the seer, societies remain blind, trapped in illusions that prevent growth. The seer disturbs comfort, but only because comfort built on denial is a fragile prison. Perhaps you have felt this duality within yourself, the ache of isolation and the pull of destiny, the sense that your way of seeing sets you apart, but also marks you for something important. Because to be the seer is not simply to suffer. It is to hold a responsibility. Your gift is not random. It is a fragment of evolution itself, a way the psyche stretches beyond its current boundaries. But without guidance, the seer drowns in the very truths they perceive. This is why Jung's discovery was both dangerous and vital. He was not just describing pathology, he was naming a path where extraordinary perception must either collapse under its own weight or be shaped into wisdom. And to understand how that shaping works, Jung began to classify not just the seer as a whole, but the different ways this perception manifests. Which brings us to the next truth. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Jung discovered that not every seer carries the same burden in the same way. The ability to perceive beyond the surface breaks into different streams, each with its own strengths, dangers, and forms of suffering. He called them differentiated functions. I call them the 4 faces of perception. And as you listen, notice which one feels most like you. 1. The feeling intuitive, the empath who absorbs. This face of the seer doesn't just notice emotions, they absorb them. Every room they enter seeps into their body like smoke, filling the lungs. Someone else's grief becomes their grief. A stranger's anxiety keeps them awake at night. Jung described them this way. The feeling intuitive lives in a state of perpetual emotional contagion, experiencing the unlived emotions of everyone in their environment. If you recognize yourself here, you have likely been called too sensitive. But the truth is, you have been carrying the emotional weight of others for years, so much so that you sometimes forget where you end and they begin. 2. The thinking intuitive, the forecaster. These seers don't just sense what people feel, they glimpse where the story is headed. They see the arc of relationships, the collapse of careers, the unraveling of decisions long before anyone else does. Jung noted, they possess an uncanny ability to perceive the logical conclusions of unconscious processes that others cannot yet see. If this is your face, you have been accused of being negative, judgmental, or even cold. In truth, you are not predicting doom. You are simply perceiving patterns in motion. But your clarity can frighten those who still cling to illusions. 3. The sensation intuitive, the body reader. For this type, perception shows up in the body. They feel the tension in someone's shoulders and know there's hidden anger. They notice fatigue before a person admits exhaustion. They even detect illness before symptoms fully emerge. Jung wrote, these individuals serve as early warning systems for psychological and physical disease in their environment. You may recognize yourself if you have always had a knack for knowing when someone is unwell before any test confirms it. It is not magic. It is a body tuned like an instrument to the frequencies others ignore. 4. The pure intuitive, the overwhelmed visionary. And then there are those who see everything, all at once. For them, perception floods in faster than it can be processed. Jung observed, they live in a state of perpetual overwhelm, receiving vast amounts of unconscious information without adequate psychological structure to process it. If this is your path, life often feels like drowning in impressions. You sense truths that make no sense to others, and sometimes no sense even to you. Your challenge is not sight, but structure. Without it, you risk collapse. Each of these faces of perception carries a different challenge, but they all share the same danger. Without integration, the gift consumes the one who holds it. Maybe you recognize yourself in one, maybe in all 4. Either way, your perception is not random. It is a function of consciousness, tuned in ways most people will never experience. But Jung warned that the seer's greatest risk lies here, in believing that seeing is enough. It is not. Sight without grounding leads to exile, exhaustion, or despair. The next step is understanding the dangers, the real costs of unintegrated perception. And these dangers are not abstract. They are the reasons so many seers break under the weight of their own gift. Every gift carries a shadow. And Jung was clear, when extraordinary perception is left unintegrated, it does not bless, it destroys. He identified 3 specific dangers, each one a trapdoor that can swallow the seer whole. Danger 1, collective disruption. The first danger comes simply from existing authentically. Jung observed that families, workplaces, even entire societies operate on silent agreements, unspoken pacts about what will not be acknowledged. When you see too clearly, you violate these pacts without even trying. You mention the tension no one else will name. You see through the lies everyone depends on to keep the peace. You break the spell of shared illusions. Jung warned, the individual who perceives too clearly threatens the collective agreements upon which social cohesion depends. The cost? You become destabilizing by nature, not because you seek chaos, but because truth itself unsettles fragile systems. Danger 2, psychological isolation. The second danger is deeper and more personal. To perceive what others cannot is to live as if you are inhabiting a different reality. You speak of what you see, and people dismiss you as dramatic. You stay silent, and the weight of unspoken truths crushes you from the inside. You begin to wonder, am I the only one awake in a world that prefers sleep? Jung wrote, The curse of consciousness is that it cannot be shared with those who do not possess it. The individual becomes an island of awareness in an ocean of unconsciousness. This isolation is more than loneliness. It is existential exile. To see too much without companions who understand is to feel like you are slowly disappearing into a parallel world no one else inhabits. Danger 3. Identity dissolution. But the third danger is the most frightening of all. Jung saw that many seers lose track of where they end and others begin. Their perception is so porous, so absorbing, that their own sense of self begins to dissolve. He called this participation mystique, a state where psychological boundaries collapse and the individual merges with the collective unconscious. In this state, you no longer know which feelings are yours and which you have inherited from others. Your identity erodes under the flood of unconscious material. Jung described it bluntly. The danger is not merely social exile, but psychological annihilation. This is the nightmare of unintegrated perception. Not just being misunderstood, not just being scapegoated, but losing yourself entirely. And maybe you have felt one of these dangers pulling at you. The way friends grow defensive when you name what they try to hide. The long nights where you feel like you are carrying everyone else's grief. The confusion when you realize you can no longer tell which emotions belong to you. This is the dark valley of the seer's path. And Jung did not sugarcoat it. Without integration, superior perception is not a blessing. It is a slow unraveling. But Jung also believed that this danger is not the end of the story. In fact, he saw it as the threshold, because the same perception that threatens to annihilate you can, with conscious work, become the path to individuation, the process by which you not only survive, but transform. The question then is not whether your perception is dangerous. It is. The real question is whether you will learn to carry it without letting it consume you. And that is why Jung gave us a map, a path of integration that turns the curse into the beginning of wisdom. That path begins now. Jung understood that perception alone is not enough. To carry extraordinary sight without breaking under it, you need integration, a deliberate shaping of your gift so it serves you instead of consuming you. He mapped this process into 3 essential movements. Phase 1. Recognition. The first step is knowing what belongs to you and what doesn't. Jung urged his patients to practice solitude, to let the noise of others settle until their own authentic voice emerged. He wrote, "The first task is to establish what belongs to you and what belongs to others. Without this discrimination, there can be no individual development." Phase 2. Shadow integration. To see clearly in others without drowning in judgment, you must face your own shadow first. Jung reminded us, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. When you claim your own capacity for darkness, you stop being destabilized by witnessing it in others. Phase 3. Conscious participation. The final movement is learning to hold what you perceive without losing yourself in it, to become a container rather than a sponge. Jung called this the privilege of the individuated person. To serve as a bridge between unconscious and conscious without being destroyed in the process. This is the path forward, but not everyone who walks it survives. Some collapse, others transform, and the difference between them changes everything. Every seer reaches a crossroads. The gift of perception either collapses the self or transforms it into wisdom. Jung saw this truth not only in his patients, but in history. He studied 2 figures who embodied opposite destinies, Friedrich Nietzsche and Meister Eckhart. Nietzsche had sight sharp enough to cut through every social, religious, and philosophical illusion. But he never learned integration. Instead of turning perception into medicine, he wielded it like a weapon. Against others, against himself. The result was brilliance scorched into isolation and eventual collapse. Jung observed, he remained identified with his superior function rather than integrating it into a balanced personality. Eckhart, the medieval mystic, carried the same depth of perception, but chose a different path. He turned his insights into compassion, weaving wisdom into words that nourished others instead of alienating them. Jung wrote, Eckhart transformed his superior perception into wisdom that could nourish others without overwhelming them. And then there was Jung himself. In his Red Book years, he confessed, I was menaced by a psychosis and was saved only by my ability to understand what was happening to me. His survival was not luck, it was integration. So here you stand as well, at the same crossroads. Will your perception fracture you like Nietzsche, or transform you like Eckhart? The answer depends on one thing: who walks beside you? Jung knew that no seer survives alone. Extraordinary perception demands extraordinary companionship. What he called the few who understand, because when you see too much, most people will recoil. They will project their shadows onto you, accuse you of negativity, or treat your insight as a threat. That rejection is not proof you are wrong. It is proof you are seeing what they cannot yet face. Survival lies in discerning who can hold what you carry. Jung identified 3 kinds of allies: fellow seers, those who have walked the same path. With them, you don't have to hide. They recognize you instantly. The awakened. People engaged in their own individuation, through therapy, inner work, spiritual practice. They may not share your perception, but they respect it. Natural containers, rare souls who can listen without judgment, absorb without collapse, and hold your truth without fear. Often older, tempered by suffering, they provide stability where others provide panic. Jung highlighted, those who have begun to know themselves can bear to be known by others. That is how you recognize them. They are not defensive when faced with hard truths. Your task is not to reveal your full sight to everyone. It is to reveal it wisely, step by step, testing whether someone leans in with curiosity or pulls back with fear. Because one true ally is worth more than 100 fragile admirers. And with even one, your gift stops being a curse. But Jung believed your gift is meant for more than survival. It is meant for evolution itself. Jung did not see the seer as a mistake of nature. He saw them as forerunners, consciousness pioneers standing at the edge of what humanity will one day need to become. Throughout history, he noticed a pattern. The ones who see too much appear before their culture is ready. They suffer the weight of truths unacknowledged, but their existence forces society to grow. He wrote in The Undiscovered Self, the individual has always been the carrier of the living spirit, the one who brings about the change in society. This is your role. Your sensitivity is not just personal, it is evolutionary. You feel collective problems in your own body before they erupt in the world. The exhaustion you carry is often not just yours. It belongs to the age itself. Think of it. Climate crisis, spiritual emptiness, collapsing systems. Seers sense these storms first, not because they are fragile, but because they are tuned to the frequencies of what is coming. And when you integrate your gift, you become what Jung called a culture carrier, someone who translates unconscious truths into medicine the collective can finally receive. You are not cursed to feel what others deny. You are entrusted with it. But to carry this role, you must first transform the raw weight of perception into a life you can actually live. And that transformation begins with returning to the story of the patient who showed Jung it was possible. Remember the patient from 1913? The woman whose perception nearly destroyed her? After 3 years of Jung's guidance, her story took a different turn. She didn't lose her sight. She learned to carry it. Through solitude, she began to separate what was hers from what she absorbed. Through shadow work, she faced her own hidden darkness, which softened her judgment of others. Through conscious participation, she practiced holding what she saw without drowning in it. And slowly, her life shifted. She found work as a counselor, where her gift became a source of healing rather than alienation. She built relationships with people who valued her perception rather than fleeing from it. Most importantly, she stopped experiencing her vision as a curse and began to live it as what Jung called a gift requiring conscious development. Jung wrote of her, the patient learned not to see less, but to see more wisely, not to perceive less deeply, but to engage more consciously with what she perceived. Her transformation proved the point. The danger is not in the sight itself. The danger is in failing to integrate it. And this is your invitation as well. To stop shrinking from what you see. To stop carrying it unconsciously like a weight, and to begin shaping it into wisdom. Because the final question is not what you see. The final question is what you will do with it. So here we are, at the end of Jung's most dangerous discovery. This is not really about Jung. It is about you. You who have carried the burden of seeing what others deny. You who have been blamed for truths you did not create. Who have wondered if your sensitivity is a flaw when in reality it is evolution itself moving through you. Jung warned, what is not brought to consciousness comes to us as fate. That is the crossroads you stand on. Either your perception remains unconscious, turning into isolation and despair, or you bring it into consciousness and it becomes medicine. This is not about being less. It is about becoming more. More whole, more grounded, more alive. The world does not need you to dim your sight. The world needs you to integrate it, to embody it, to wield it with humility and precision. Because when you do, you stop being overwhelmed by your gift and start becoming what Jung called a carrier of culture, one who helps consciousness itself evolve. So I ask you, will you let this sight destroy you? Or will you become the one who transforms it into wisdom? You are not too much. You are exactly what this moment in history requires. Step into that truth. Claim it. And if you are ready to walk further, join me in this movement of seers. So together, we can bring what is unconscious into the light. Because the forbidden sight was never meant to break you. It was meant to remake you. Don't forget to keep watching the next video. It's important much more than you imagine. I'll see you there.